All right, welcome everyone to the Serious Angler podcast. Here, our main course for you guys will be talking and hopefully teaching you some more about bass fishing. And of course, here at Serious Angler, that does not come without a distraction or 10. So whether you're here to learn or just hear some bassin banter, you're in the right spot. I'm your host, Bailey Egbrett, and here with me is the bassin captain, Mr. Andy Full, and Idaho's finest mustache, Mr. Adam Deacon. Fellas, how are we doing today?
Good. Ready to go fishing. I'm getting the cabin fever. Right now is bad and kind of in a depressed state. At least the sun is out though, so I guess that helps a little.
Sun is up, but the temperatures are still low, so trade-offs.
It's modestly warm, like a balmy 35 and sunny, so it's not terrible.
Yeah, I got the text from my wife the other day on the way home from work. She went to the gym and she's like, I'm in shorts and it's 33 degrees. Why am I warm? I'm like, well, maybe because it's been 12 degrees the past week. That could help a little bit. But
it's balmy.
That sun, man, that sun makes a heck of a difference.
It does.
100%.
But Deke, I think I'm going to make a new phrase or new term for you out of Idaho for each show. I think that's what the thing is.
Oh boy.
We're going to find something.
We're going to find what sticks. Like someone's going to be like, that's it. One of these days. Like it's going to, something's going to.
I think we already know what has stuck. So what's the next one to stick?
This is true.
He's a man of many names. He's Idaho's finest stash, finest potato lover, and he's our Sheekin.
Yeah, unbelievable. What a deal. Man, here in Idaho, it has been snowing, which has been great. We needed some moisture this winter. It really hasn't come yet. So that's all happening. I've been out skiing, which it's been kind of a fun thing for me. I used to ski a lot in Colorado, and then I kind of got away from it. And being back in Idaho or being close, easy ski mountain, man, I have been enjoying it and challenging myself skiing wise. So that has been a bunch of fun. But I am also like Andy, cabin fever, ready to absolutely get out and fish. My boat is finally almost done in relation to electronics and everything else. Fired up, man. All Humminbird this year on the graphs. So super fired up. More to come on all of that. But that is gonna get out, mess around, chase some crappie around before the season starts to dial everything in forward facing wise.
So for there gonna be some you mentioned graphs, does that mean forward facing too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, little Mega Live 2 action, eh?
Little ML2, baby.
I see more people dabbling with it. I'll put it out there. So Rudd, he got it, of course. He called me yesterday, FaceTime me to dial it in because this is his first time using forward facing. I was watching Milliken's videos yesterday, and he had one Garmin on, but also had the Humminbird on as well. But it was in landscape, which is perspective for the Garmin Lowrance folks. But it was seeing more people testing out Mega Live 2. I'd be curious to see, especially like a guy like a Milliken who's so good with it, and kind of their feedback coming from it too. But especially yours, and once you can go put some fish in Lake Crisco and see how you feel after effect.
Now we're talking.
We're gonna get some Sheik and Cooks episodes on
Sheik and Cooks. Dude, there we go. There's your ebook there, D. Sheik and Cooks.
Ebook. Unbelievable.
Deacon's looking for help through the BAM tour this year. If you could buy his ebook, Sheik and Cooks, would be greatly appreciated. Link down below.
Sheik and Cooks. It'll be like 3 recipes that will be very simple, but they will taste good.
So. Recipe number 1, beer and fish. Recipe number 2, fish.
2 options.
You can
not much else.
Tequila in there instead.
Oh,
tequila and lime, baby.
All you need.
Well, dude, shoot, you're leaving soon, aren't you? For your first derb of the year?
Yeah, I got a little bit here. So end of February, Don Pedro on it's the pro-am of the BAM, not the BAM 60 tour, but the pro-ams that BAM puts on. Fishing that to support that. In addition to, it's the last off limits time frame before it goes completely off limits. That's what's neat about this format. 30 days off limits on all of these tournaments. So there's no practice whatsoever. So I've never been there. I don't think I'm going to do this on all of these events, but the ones that I can make and do, I think it makes sense to maybe go check it out a little bit and learn it. And there's a derby going on while it's there. So might as well throw the hat in the ring and get fishing to 2025.
Heck yeah, dude. It's gonna be
Catch 'em.
fun. Yeah, we'll have more to come on that. I guess the folks will just have to wait for the next series Western segment to hear more details. But man, we got a fun episode ahead of us. So kind of Andy, kick things off. What can the folks look forward to in today's show?
Well, first of all, we have an awesome panel and a trio of guests coming on, talking the old jighead minnow, the cricket tickling, the technique that everyone wants to get rid of but secretly loves to do.
The one they want to get rid of that's been around for ages.
Yes, and if you go to archaic times and dropping on them on 2D, all the way to the front-facing sonar craze that we have today. But we got an awesome lineup of Rob G, Jeff Gustafson, and also Jacob Wheeler is going to be chiming in here to give away all of their forward-facing secrets. So with the Jighead Minnow, so it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I pumped for this one because I think you guys can agree here is these guys in their own way have been extremely successful with the Jighead Minnow, from obviously Wheeler winning all the AOIs, it seems, at MLF and being in the top 10, it seems, almost every freaking time, hot off another top 10 to start this year at Lake Conroe.
Classic wins.
Gussy winning a classic and an elite trophy on it. One with forward, one without forward, using 2D when he won the first elite trophy. And then Rob G having a stellar rookie season on it. It's gonna be awesome to get the different perspectives. But Deacon, when you see this lineup, what's one of the first things that come to mind for you on some of the information we might be getting?
Yeah, I mean, for me, man, it is just top tier, right? I mean, we're talking about the highest level guys in this. And this is, I mean, something that I've been talking about as probably one of my most excited episodes that I'm currently involved in. And it's just because it's all that's happening, all the rays, all the craze around this stuff. It's the time of year for it to be consistent. And there's juice given away, man. Like it's more than just basics around this stuff. And it has gotten so complex and will continue with all the different techniques and little differences and Japanese culture involved here. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, and I think each of these guys are a little bit different in how they approach the Jighead Minnow game, and I think that's one that's really cool to see the different POVs and their strategies behind it. And I think one thing for folks that are tuning into this, you're like, yeah, the Jighead Minnow, you've probably seen 1,000,002 episodes or videos on YouTube or podcasts about it, and this is one of those things where it's like we just when we think we've hit the ceiling on what you can do with a Jighead Minnow, we're obviously wrong because something else comes out of. Somebody thinks about a new head design or a new line tie on the head design or new bait, new things in tandem, sinking braid. When somebody came to me and they're going to use line for forward facing, I thought they were nuts. And now it seems to be you have to have it in order to to do well with it. And it's crazy to think that there isn't a ceiling yet. So this is why we're putting this out for folks that are learning, wanting to improve on their game that they're already doing. And there's a lot of folks still, even just now, diving into the Jighead Minnow game that want to get good with it. And this is going to be a great 101, really a great get you in a great spot from rod setup, reel setup to jig heads, sizes, hook sizes, baits, the whole kind of gauntlet here. So that's the goal of this episode. But before we get in with our first guest for today, we got a couple things to cover off, and that's with Deacon. What's been the buzz around the industry, man?
Yeah, one sec before we dig into that. Something that just made me think through that. It's confusing to me, and maybe it's because, as we know, these other tackle areas, hard baits, other things are not selling as well as Jighead minnows, man, and other soft plastic things. But it's interesting to me to dig into, like, when you think of a craze of a new technique that comes out, I feel like they don't change very much. And maybe this is overhyped with all these different changes that are happening with the Jighead minnow. But like, think about the drop shot, dude. Drop shot comes out, it's a drop shot. Like, there's no crazy new changes with a drop shot hook. There's no crazy new changes with a weight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we've made them tungsten now, but like, there's just not these big changes and different ideations, and not just baits, but like, I just feel like this is way more. People are maybe overcomplicating it, but but it's like valid. Like guys are seeing benefits by complicating it to some degree. So just super interesting to me. It sounds so simple, but it's not the same as like other techniques where things kind of just like they get to a level and they stay, and that's what it is. This is like we're still going up.
Yeah, it feels like we haven't hit that plateau effect yet with the minnow. And
No.
it's gonna be crazy where that plateau actually comes.
What it's cool, I think, when you look at the trend of it is, Deacon, you mentioned this earlier. We have some Japanese culture intertwined, where this is kind of where they were doing this long before we were here in the States, and at least to the effect of hovering and casting at fish versus moping as Gussy's been famous for with when we caught them on 2D and such on Tennessee River. But we've seen the effect of Japan, Japanese bass fishing culture into this. But I think one thing that it seems to be where a lot of the innovations or the new products come from are pressured fisheries. People in those regions, because they have to come up with something new, because there's 100, 200, 300 other anglers that are throwing the same dang thing at these fish. They need to find something new. And that's where there's a whole new episode that we won't even get down this rabbit hole of is it new? Is it work because it's new, or is it work because it actually has something that resonates with the fish better? Or, which is it? Is it scientifically that it's better, or is it that fish are like, hey, I haven't seen that yet. I'm going to take my chances that I can eat that.
Dude, such a valid point, and I'm sure there's some science behind that, but it brings me back to like the Kentucky Lake days. Like when I first started fishing Kentucky Lake, it was the heyday, right? In the mid 2000s, and all these guys were doing, your regular big football jig offshore, cranking, these types of things. And then all of a sudden, because they were getting so pressured, these same ledges were just getting hit day after day after day. Like guys started throwing super wacky things, pink jigs, yellow crankbaits. I mean, just like, but crazy wacky colors and just different things to just get bit. And it worked because those fish were like, wait, I haven't seen a green pumpkin jig like I've seen the last 9 days in a row. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess the deeper dive in that thought is like, how much does color really matter, and what color are they seeing? So
Right. Like if everyone's flipping a black and blue, like guess what? I've flipped white before. Unbelievable. Like, you know what I mean? Like you get bit because everyone else is doing something different.
A great example of that, and I think we'll cap it on this because I know with the three of us and how our brains work, we'll sit here for an hour and we'll have to make this into a brand new episode. But great example, John Dalton, Creek Fishing Adventures, he does a little bit of tournament stuff, big YouTuber. He whips everyone's freaking tail down there in Tennessee with a pink bubblegum yum dinger.
Mm-hmm.
Not green pumpkin, not black, not the same old colors you hear about. A pink bubblegum. So think of like a pink and yellow swirl. That's what he's throwing for his yum dinger and catching giants doing it. So it makes you wonder.
it's just giving a little lemonade, man.
Yeah. So like next time you're going through that used box, the tackle shop, you're like, all these colors suck. Maybe you should, if they're 50 cents to $1 a pop, maybe you should just give them a whirl. Give them a shot. I mean, I'm going to try it this year, especially fun fishing. I'm going to go to some of the freakiest colors that I haven't even touched yet. Just give them a shot. See what happens.
Yeah, dude, for real.
I've definitely caught some fish on the bubblegum pink Senko, like skipping it underneath trees and stuff behind people.
Well, pink bubblegum, I think is proven as one of the colors.
Doesn't matter, different color.
Andy's Senko box is like.
I think the wild. Remember the Deacon? Do you remember the tiki stick 5-inch stick baits?
No.
Like they had crazy colors. There was a red, black, and yellow one that I've caught fish on. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Andy, we're also
fish are dumber than we think.
Okay, fish will eat just about anything we throw at them.
I'm just saying. Just giving a fun story here, all right?
Yeah. Well,
always put me down.
We need to make this a show. Maybe this is one we need to get Barden on. Definitely one I'll ask him on the next real biology segment here. But yeah, before we get into a whole hour show, let's get into some of our industry insights, Steve.
Sure, guys. Yeah. So this is from the Bass Boat folks thinking through industry stuff here. So first of all, this is brought to you by our friends over at Rec Lending. If you are in the market for buying a boat, check Rec Lending out. They are super great folks that will certainly take care of you and make the process seamless, because buying a used boat or a new boat can be a pain in the butt, especially when you're talking travel and everything else related to it. Safe way to do it. And they super experienced in their own right, buying and selling boats all around the country. So couple things here. BPT, fellas. I don't know if you guys watched this all go down. Pretty wild, but Justin Cooper ends up winning last minute BPT, super tight race. Probably one of the coolest. I just tuned in right while it was going on, and then I got a bunch of friends call me and say, "Hey, did you see what happened?" So anyways, I think the biggest thing kind of there is let's chat the new format. And that's, to me, that's the electric take, right? That's our Amped Outdoors electric take. And that's our preferred battery here with the Serious Angler podcast. But man, new format. What's everyone's take in this situation?
Andy, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So first, I want to say, I think if they can figure it out correctly, it fits the mold that they want to present. And we were talking before, right? Like, are they presenting it properly of what they want to do? So it's like the way they limited forward facing sonar use is cool because it's different from everyone else and they're allowing them to use it for one period. But when you watch the event, what are we seeing?
Yeah.
Guys
So dig
tickling
into
them.
that a little bit more of like, what do you mean by presented differently for the folks that are tuned in? Are you talking live coverage?
Yeah, so while they're live coveraging the event, it'd be cool to see the different techniques that they're using. Like if you're going to present it as we're limiting how much forward-facing sonar someone can use, why aren't we showcasing everyone else that's not using it during periods? So like when I tuned in, like I was able to see Talk catch some on a chatterbait, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or like I think I saw Drew Gill trying to pick apart a grass patch on day one when I was able to watch, and I missed a lot of the forward facing sonar stuff. But the one day I did catch for like an hour, I think it was period one, they literally just had the cameras on all the guys throwing the minnow around, and I was like, oh, I want to see the guys that have that forward facing sonar emblem off. I want to see what they're doing too, because some of them were catching them pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you said that, and I'll dig into it a little bit deeper. Before I do, though, if you guys didn't catch it, we put out a winners show. We're going to try to, with the trails this year, get with some of the winners and just do something quick for you guys. 5-10 minutes with these guys that place in the top 3 or top 5, whoever we can get a handle of after the fact. And so we had Justin himself, Jacob Wall, and Colby talk about a little quick recap and some of the baits and stuff they caught him on. But I got to give a quick shout to old Justin Cooper because we had him on, and I met Justin. It was the 2019 Classic when Hank won on Gunnersville, and that was back. I was working a booth at the Classic. My first Classic, I had to work, and he was right next to the booth, next to me in the V&M booth. We talked for a bunch, and that turned into the first episode Justin was ever on Serious Angler before he was fishing any pro trail. So cool to see it come full circle. And now he's just got his first BPT trophy, 150K in the bank. It was a huge shout out to Jay Coop. But I completely agree, Andy. I think that, and we talked about this when the changes happened, that I think MLF did the best job of giving the best of both worlds. Where we're in to backstep. As a fan, you should be really excited about live coverage this year because you're getting 3 different products, and we're going to see what we like most. So you should be excited about that from a fan standpoint. But I think while there were some exciting points on it, and obviously the last day being the best day because you see the top 10, so you're going to see quite a diversity of coverage because you're forced to with the top 10 there. The one issue that I had in the days leading up is there was some good stuff like Talk. We shared that clip on Instagram as well. There was some great stuff of that, but a lot of their emphasis was on the forward-facing guys. And I think while that, yes, there might be a rule change, if we're not reflecting that in the live coverage, then are we actually making a difference here? Especially if we're talking about the public watching and tuning in, that sort of thing. I think that's when we need to reflect more there. And so that brings me to another point here. Sorry to go too long-winded, Adam, but I saw something on Instagram. Somebody posted like, oh, these guys, this is just going to show that they need forward-facing to catch fish. It's easier to catch more fish on forward-facing. And I want to preface this, and I want to combat that and more of want to force people that are maybe against it or saw that same thing to add an additional lens to it of, if you notice the guys that caught them with forward facing, when they would switch to not using forward facing, they wouldn't stay in the same area. They would go shallow, they'd go to flats, they go to different things because the fish they were fishing for on forward facing are very difficult to fish for without it. Meaning you could still catch them, but you're going to catch 1 or 2 to the 10 you could with forward facing. That doesn't mean it's easier. It means it's making you more efficient. And so I want to combat that and notice all too, like that just might mean that there's a higher density of population offshore versus shallow, or these fisheries are much more pressured than we even gave them credit for. So it's, don't just jump to technology off the bat. I think there's a grain of that for sure should be discussed, but look at the other facts that are there too. But sorry to go long-winded. Deacon, what do you think?
No, I mean, well, I think you bring up a good point. I would say it was incredibly impressive to me how much more efficient in the catch rate with guys running forward facing. I mean, mind blowing the differences there. And we all kind of thought that, but then, someone wins a tournament, cranking the bank or whatever it may be. But in a catch, weigh, release format, like you better be taking care of that window where you can use it, because otherwise you are going to be left in the dust in its entirety. It's cool to see guys putting the poles down. That's something I noticed for sure, in the grass, finding a grass bed and throwing a chatterbait, throwing a trap, doing stuff to just get bit by those grass fish, which can be very, very big fish a lot of the time, and maybe not as many, and work really well in a 5-fish format. So it was really cool to see those differences. I almost wonder, and just to get your guys' take, and I think they're going to figure the coverage out here to dial in a little bit better of the less forward facing. I mean, the traditional situation with Major League Fishing is when someone catches a fish or someone is hooked up, they pan to that guy, right? And so, of course, when guys using forward facing, like that's generally going to happen more often. That being said, I felt like there was less camera boats here. I could be completely wrong there. They could have been a ton of camera boats, but it just seemed like there was less presence there. And that was just my personal take, or like kind of looking at things. It just seemed like there would only be a couple of guys being rotated, and then, someone would switch in new, but it's not like there was a ton of cameras rolling around. So maybe that was part of it too, but super neat to see. Curious to see what it'll kind of continue with, but I wonder if it'll make things more competitive. That's a take that I kind of have there, is like, meaning this was a very close finish at the end here.
Yeah.
And because they're only able to benefit from that one window of catching at a very high rate, it kind of levels out the people behind them to some degree, to where there's not going to necessarily be that big, the wins we've seen in Major League Fishing. Sometimes it's like 30, 40 pounds. Like it's incredible and boring at the end. So it's an interesting take. Everyone's kind of in it, I feel like, a little bit further.
Yeah. And so what I did with that, your notion on the camera boats, I just texted Joe Pogger at MLF, which shout out to their team. They are super awesome to work with, especially like somebody like us that likes to share content, things of that nature. They are great people, and treat us as such, and awesome to go to Red Crest and things like that. So hopefully, and usually Joe is one of the quickest to respond. So I wouldn't be surprised if I start seeing some floating 3 dots here in a second. We get an answer on the camera boats, but that is a good point. I'm excited to see, especially with the schedule, where they're going next, kind of how all this stuff pans out. And it was cool to see there's a couple of guys that didn't even turn it on all event.
Yeah.
I'm cool to hear them talk through all that on live, but
wild.
Yeah. So some great moments live. Hopefully you guys caught that. If you did, comment down below in the YouTube comments, or DM us and such on social if you guys are listening on a podcast, to let us know what you thought about the live if you watched it. And then I think if you guys had nothing else left on the BPT, we'll get into Bassmaster Kayak Series.
Yeah.
So
we've
from the kayak, huh?
Say
business
what?
from the kayak, baby.
It's from the kayak. Yep. We do this just for
yeah.
Andy. But dude,
yes,
I have no problems with it.
We're gonna get Andy in a kayak this year, Deacon. It's gonna happen.
We have to. I want to see him fall. That's all.
I probably will fall, but I mean, if we go to a spot, I mean, I'll go if it's like a pond or something, so that I can get my rods back easily if I do tip her over.
All right, I want some chicken emojis in the comments directed at Andy, you guys. So he's
fine. I'll take them. Anxiety is real.
So Sherman Bishop won the Bassmaster Kayak event on Kissimmee Lakes. Sounded like 18 of the top 20 were all in the same lake. from
Oh my gosh.
feedback. So sounds like it was going down somewhere and nowhere else. Sounds like it was pretty
Sounds
tough.
like Florida.
But with that being said, he won with 100 inches on both days. So for my boating folk like your guys yourselves, 100 inches is a 25 plus pound bag, especially when you're talking about Florida fish in the spawn or pre-spawn. He caught some big old fish. So congrats to Sherman Bishop on that, as well as while we're still in Florida, Lake Okeechobee was kicked off the Bassmaster College Series. So congrats to Braden Batchelor and Quinn Williams. Sound like no forward-facing guys. One with 42 pounds for 2 days. So big shout out to those boys. That's a heavy weight for 2 days. It took away the dub in the Bassmaster College Series. But what else we got around the industry, Deke?
Yeah, more kind of traditional business from the Bass Boat Talk here. Charger Boat, which has been around for quite some time. It's I believe a conglomerate kind of with a couple of other ski brands and different things. But they make, a couple of boats a year, nothing crazy, but there's been some, predominant pros that have run Chargers. James Watson was a guy that ran Chargers for a really long time. They apparently have closed up shop, and there was really sad situation. I believe there was a death in the family there in relation to the owner. So I am curious. I haven't dug deep into this yet, but something to think through and have some more info on the next one. But pretty interesting news. Charger, I mean, the bass boat industry has boats that come and go to some degree, and then your mainstays. And Charger's been around for a long time, so interesting mix up there.
Is anyone still running off the top of your head, running a Charger?
Man, not off the top of my head, but I haven't looked at guys' boats for 2025 season all that much.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure there's stuff that's out there, and we can give these guys an update next week for those interested, and I'm sure we'll put out some more content on that. But fellas, anything else on that? Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, folks, before we get into our first guest of the 3 for today's show, real quick for you guys, Omni Efficient, always running sales. Make sure you guys are heading over there, refreshing some of the new arrivals and things of that nature. They always have sales each week. We try to bring you guys updates on that. So right now, 20% off of Woo Tungsten and VMC Tungsten. That's until the 11th of February. And right now, take advantage of 20% off all fishing line. So if you're like me, you need to be respooling just about everything, especially fluorocarbon-wise for the year. Take advantage of that. And then, like I said, the new arrivals, usually they have a lot of release stuff. They are pretty loud about some of their new baits. Berkeley just released a new max scent shape, the Stank Bug, that just hit Omnia. And it's a new max scent flipping bait. I know Rudd has hyped this thing up on some of his videos. So this thing actually looks pretty sick. So I think it's a 3.5-inch bait. Andy, when I saw this, I thought of you very first thing because I think you'll be all
I already bought some.
Yesterday. He's trying to stay silent on us, folks. I learned about it this morning. Here he is buying them. They're already on his way to his house. With Omni shipping, probably already at his house. And he didn't say a word to me.
Sorry, I forgot.
Classic Andy.
Yeah. Well, folks, to make sure you take advantage of it, use code Series10 on all your orders. You guys save 10% off. And actually, right now, you probably heard it on the ad before this show, but Sirius Pro 20. If you guys are looking to become pro members, saves you 20% off your membership for the year. So 20% off of what I think is $50. I'm not good at math. Andy, help me out.
$12.
Thank you. $48. Okay. Or 38. There's my math. $38 for pro membership for the year. Make sure you guys take advantage of it while that code is still active. But sounds like we should get into our first guest here, Mr. Rob G.
All right, folks. We are kicking off the show here, the old Jighead Minnow panel. We'll call it the Minner panel, if you will. And we got a pal of ours, Mr. Rob G. First of 3 guests intended for this show. And this is going to be a fun one. And Rob, I think this is one that obviously I think has brought you a lot of money in the 2024 season, at least the old Jighead Minnow. But as we get through this, and before we get to the question, I should say, so one, how you doing, buddy? And are you ready to get back to fishing in 2025?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Can y'all see me just fine?
Yeah, we can see you good, buddy.
We got you.
Because on my screen, y'all are just paused, so I'm kind of confused.
Oh, is it frozen?
Boy.
Yeah,
that's not good.
You're good on this end, man.
I mean, I love a Jighead Minnow, and I love to talk about it too. But a lot of people don't like to hear about it. But I'm glad y'all having me on to talk about it.
Yeah, there's a working theory I have, and I think this applies to a lot of. We're not going to go down the whole rabbit hole, but with the controversy of tech and all this stuff, there's what we call the silent majority, and I think the silent majority, the vast majority of anglers, they just want to learn. They want to know what the raving topics are, and I can tell you, at least, and Andy can back me up here, is a lot of the Jighead Minnow stuff seems to be some of the best trending content that you can put out there, and that means that a lot of people want to know about it. So there's definitely a lot of people that I'll just look into. I think it's the silent majority. Anybody that has an issue is in the loud minority, is what I'll call it. So we're happy you're here to talk about the Jighead Minnow and the guests that we'll have on after you. But we think that you bring an interesting POV to the topic. Obviously, you're a killer with it. And so I guess to kick things off, I guess really is how often is the Jighead Minnow on the deck for you out of the 365?
I mean, basically all of 2023 and all of 2024, and now going into 2025, I've had it, tied on, rigged in the rod locker for, I guess, 2.5 years now. I mean, kind of been playing with it ever since Gussy won, Teleco Loudon tournament, his first one, which was 2021 or 2020, one of those two. But, really 2023, I mean, that was kind of the year it broke free. And now I have it tied on year round.
Yeah, it kind of seems
it's kind of
like
hard to put it down.
that, but also like there's not a place where it won't work now. Like we saw it happen with Florida and Okeechobee. Granted, that was more of a jerk bait, but people were throwing it. Like it's interesting to see how people are finding a place to where they're like, oh, there's no way a Jighead Minnow won't work here, and then people are finding a way to make it work. So would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, it works most places. I mean, I feel like they picked a pretty good schedule this year for on the elites where it won't be as Jighead Minnow friendly. Some of the times of the year we're going to the places it won't be as, dominated with it. So, but I feel like majority of the lakes you go to, you can catch a bass on a Jighead Minnow. Might not be the deal, but you can get them to bite it. I mean, it's basically a fluke with a ball head, and you can make it flee like a bait fish. So they love that.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
So speaking of ball heads, right? Like there's all kinds of ranges and head sizes from like 1/32 all the way to 5/8. What size or sizes are like maybe your main three or your favorite one to throw based on like a general stable condition?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm basically on like the U.S. metric system is what my go tos are. I mean, I'm pretty much 16th all the way to 1 ounce jig heads for the minnow. Like in my box, I have of jig heads. That's what they range from. But my standard one, my standard two, I go for are the 3/16 and 1/4 ounce. Like those are, I mean, for fish, from 15 to 25 foot. And that's usually like the prime spot to catch them. It's not it like when you're really jacking them on a jig head minnow, those are the sizes you're really going to use.
Yeah. Now, is there a specific head you like to use with those weights?
Yeah, I make my own head actually.
Oh,
Yeah, just a standard ball head. Actually, I might have one right here.
that's while you're digging for that, one of the things I've been hearing, and I'm curious your take on it, to kind of coincide with the weights, was at Queen Tackle, Jeff Queen, who's a good friend of ours, has been saying, obviously, who makes one of the more popular heads out there, that a lot of people are asking for like 6/0, like some giant hooks in these things. Where's your head at with hook size?
Yeah, like mainly I the heads I make, I only pull like make them in 2/0, 3/0, and 4/0, and majority of them are 3/0. That
Okay.
covers 3/0 to me covers 4, 5, and 6-inch baits, and 2/0 covers like the 2.5 to, the 3.8 inch, and then the 4/0 for the 7-inch. And I mean, I do need to pour a couple or like make a couple. I don't pour them, but I make them. They're like, I need a 6/0 probably for an 8-inch if I ever do that, but I've never caught one on an 8-inch. So
But you've tried.
I've never tried actually.
Okay. I think sizing's a big deal with a lot of this, right? I mean, we're seeing so many variations, and it's how many ways can you skin a cat? But my gosh, we in the fishing industry, we can skin a lot of cats apparently because we just go down rabbit holes. But I guess, do you have a mainstay of like, this is the bait that I am going to start with? And then are you cycling through a bunch of different things? I guess give us your breakdown when you show up to a place.
Well, yeah, typically I have like, one I always have tied on, my most confident one. And that's typically a 4 or 5-inch minnow, split tail minnow. And from that, I kind of have to read, using your electronics, you have to read the surroundings and the bait fish and how they're reacting to bait, or if they're in bait, or if they're just floating real high versus real deep. And that's kind of how I vary my minnow approach after that. For instance, if they're floating like just suspended up sunning kind of like they were at Toledo Bend at the very beginning of the year last year. They were probably 4 foot under the surface, over 30 or 40 foot. So in that instance, I was throwing like a 16th ounce or 8th ounce with like a real slender 3.5 inch minnow that wouldn't spook them when it splashed around them. You know what I mean? That was why I chose that style. So like it wouldn't make a loud splash. It wouldn't scare them when it was entering the water. And whenever they saw it, it didn't seem like it would startle them. You know what I mean? Kind of like a cat. Like if you throw something like near it, smaller stuff won't spook them, but like something big plops near them, they're gonna jump and run away. Like that's kind of the same. But
Yeah.
when they're deeper in the water column, that's when it's a little bit different. And I mean, shoot, I've caught them. That tournament they were doing that sunning deal in certain areas, and then like more of the main lake stuff, they were in like 40, 50 foot deep. So that's when I would choose a one that would sink very fast. That's how I put my minnows together. Like whenever they're deep, yeah, I have certain minnows that fall faster than others. Like they just glide through on like a heavy 1/2 or 3/4 ounce weight. And I mean, that's kind of how I choose. But that 10-foot depth to 25, that's where the rolling action minnow comes in play. And that's mainly going to be used on a 3/16 or 1/4 ounce. So I've got those rolling baits, which is like ledge fishing and suspended bass that are on the 3/16 and 1/4 ounce jig heads. Then I have different minnows for those high fish or the really deep fish, depending on the size of weight of jig heads I use and what they're feeding on.
So you're breaking it down more on based on how that bass is behaving versus like just kind of run through cycle.
Behaving, where they're at in the water column is kind of their behavior. That's what tells me how their behavior is, and if they're around forage or not. Pretty much, that kind of a deal.
Yeah. And so break down a little bit around forage when you're saying like, great thing about forward facing, right, is we're really learning where these fish are setting up in relation to bait. Mm-hmm. But how does that change your approach when you're around forage? Is it strictly a size thing where you're like, baby shad, so I'm going to go way down? But what do you mean by around forage?
So what I mean by that is, if they're suspended around bait, mainly 80 to 90% of the time, they're going to be feeding on small thread fin. So in that instance, like the biggest bait I would throw was really like a 5-inch.
Okay.
And those high floater ones, like I was talking about earlier, I feel like from that 0 to 5 foot in the water column, they feed on like those little tiny glass minnows or like little silver sides that you just see cruise in the top of the water, like in like 1 or 2 fish. Like you'll spook them with your trolling motor sometimes. You'll just see them and they're just like, you don't really know what kind of fish it is, but they're like these little tiny minnows. You know what I mean? I feel like they eat those sometimes when they're sunning just for a little snack. And kind of like a ledge fish or a stump bass or a brush pile bass, that's when I really use like the bigger stuff because I feel like those fish most time just stay in the brush or the stump or on their like hard spot shell when like threadfin go by unless all of them get up off the bottom. So you need something like a bigger meal to entice them to come up to look at your bait. And that's when I use like the 5 to 7 inch baits. If that makes sense.
Yeah, crappie or anything else, right? Like brush
Yeah, like,
pile fish are just feeding on big stuff.
exactly.
Got it.
So to coincide with that, like when you see a negative reaction to one of your baits that you're throwing at fish, is your first move to be change the bait, or are you changing the size of your head?
It just depends. That's really kind of, it's hard to explain in that instance because you kind of have to, read several different fish. You can't just base it off of one. So I would have to, try to catch at least 5 to 10 to see how negatively affecting it is based on that particular, those start out confidence baits. And then you reduce the size of your bait or enhance the size of your weight. You know what I mean? Basically, this inside, you never want to increase the size of your weight for bites, if that makes sense. The only reason you're increasing the size of your weight is to get down to the fish faster.
Got it. Okay.
Wow.
Like
I was
they
always
like,
curious about that.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, the more aggressive bass like smallmouth and spots, they do like a heavier weight because you can speed it up away from them faster. But for the most part, the only reason you're enhancing your weight is to get it to the fish and like hit them accurately when they're deep.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So,
And I know we don't want to give up all juice here, but there's a lot of Jighead Minnow brands out there. I mean, for the guy that's like maybe learning right now to get into this, and maybe that's a nice 4-inch bait, 5-inch bait, something kind of in the middle. What would be like a starter for somebody to like, hey, you're going to go catch fish on this thing?
Like a particular
Brand.
bait,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, probably one of the best bang for your bucks is the one Gussy used to win the classics on Loudon and Teleco. It's a Laztec. It's it resembles a shad very well. And I mean, it rolls and twitches just like anything else. So that's probably the number one, like most caught bass on that bait there has been.
Right.
And that's the scented jerk shads, I think is what he throws.
Scented,
That
yeah.
Gussy glimmer. Yeah. Yeah. For folks that are tuning into any baits we talk about, we'll say what, Andy?
So I think they just came out with another size in that too. They have like a 3.5, a 3 3/4, a 4. I think there's even a 4.5 now too.
There's a 7-inch as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna be pushing that. We're gonna have people be throwing their 7-inch Jighead minnows by the end of this episode. Don't you worry. Yeah, we'll link all that down
I need
below.
to get better at throwing is the big ones. I get stuck throwing the itty bitty ones way too much.
I mean, yeah, that's mainly what kind of shad they're feeding on though most of the time. So
Right.
it's not a bad thing.
So with talking about getting down to fish, obviously with depth and things like that, my one question to you, especially when obviously paired with forward facing, do you have like I won't cast at a fish deeper than this depth, and I won't cast at a fish farther than this range? Like, do you kind of have like, I try to get within 40, 50 feet of fish, or I won't cast anything deeper than 30 type of deal? Like, or does it not matter?
To me, no. Like I know, like Drew Gill, and he's one of those analytical, like
Very.
screen size. He always has to have it dialed in, and he only throws at them if they're in like that 40 to 50-foot range. But for me, I like to like this past year. I feel like what helped me was I got good at hitting them out at like past 90. You know what I mean? Like I call it Chris Kyling them, sniping them deep. That's what I like. I mean,
I love
if
that.
if I can hit them out that range, they don't feel any sort of presence of the boat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I caught a lot of big fish hitting them out past at least 80. You know what I mean?
I mean, we're not talking
I-
about scoping them. We're Chris Kyling them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is as good as it gets.
Exactly.
He's
What a
certified at that point. Certified.
I think we got our
from a
quote of the
mile out.
year.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's awesome.
That's incredible.
Oh, man.
Sniping.
So,
I'm going
now that we
sniping.
know like the range that you like to throw at them, there is no range, right? Like, what is your rod reel setup, and are you in favor of sinking braid, or do you just use your standard braid on the market, like your 8 carriers or 5 carriers?
Yeah. So, and my like depth, I forgot to add about that. I have caught fish in like 65. I've caught bass in like 60, like deeper than 60 with a jig head. Largemouth and smallmouth, like
Wow.
Dale Hollow. And that's another place that's tricky. If you go to a place like Dale Hollow, they feed on trout. So you can throw a dang 7-incher to a fish in 65 foot and catch one. I mean, and they wouldn't bite a 3-inch minnow because they're feeding on trout that are that deep in the summertime. So that's another one you got to pay attention to what they're really feeding on and know like the forage that's in the lake. But back to rod and reel and line and stuff. But yeah, I am a huge proponent of sinking style braids. Like all the braid on my reels are Japanese, some sort of line. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna drop what the names are just because I want to being able to buy it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of sinking braid. That kind of braid is crucial when it comes to fishing deep, at least, because your line goes directly to the bait instead of having a huge bow. And I feel like that helps a lot with the rolling style action. But for the rods, I mean, I throw a G Loomis 872, which is the 7.3 medium, whenever I'm throwing a bait, pretty much 3/8 and heavier. Like, and for largemouth, like, so if I'm, and for big, like, southern smallies, like Teleco and, Dale Hollow and stuff like that, just because it's got more beef to it. Like, I'm not a real limpy, like 6'6" Fajita rod guy. I like the stronger action rods by G Loomis. And then the 7.1 852 G Loomis NRX. That's my 1/4 ounce and 3/8 ounce rod for when they're 20 to 40 foot deep. But 30 to 60 is that 872 with the 3/8 to 3/4 ounce weight. Then the 1/4 to 3/8, maybe half, sometimes half on the 852. And then my all around, like 3/16 to sometimes 3/8 if I'm fishing for smallmouth. I do the 842 G Loomis Conquest. That's the one I caught the Century Club belt on up at St. Lawrence. I was using the 842 and at Champlain the 842. But and then
what are the Sorry,
what?
just for I'm not a Loomis guy, but on the 842 Conquest, so give us a breakdown of what that is as far as their action and size, length, all that.
Yeah, that's a 7-foot medium, just fast taper.
Okay.
The 852 is a 7.1 medium extra fast, and
Okay.
the 872 is a 7.3 medium extra fast. So it's pretty stout. Like it's like a deep shaky head rod is what it was made for. But and that 852 is like made for a shaky head style. Like it's got a lot of just backbone. I was gonna say something else, but backbone.
So, what have you
Yeah.
found the difference in using like a stiffer, faster rod as compared to like some of the guys that are using like the softer, wimpier, shorter rods? What
They
do you
like
think it does for
they
you?
like they can. It's easier to make your bait roll with the limber rods, but I don't feel like I have to exert as much energy with the stronger rods once I get in a rhythm, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely makes sense. And you could say the same thing for like a jerk bait.
You're not sitting there like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes
exactly.
sense.
Like a jerk bait. Like you have to pull your jerk bait harder with the more limber rods versus and you kind of have to set the hook a little bit differently on them too. So it's just kind of whatever you like. It's your personal preference, but that's just what I like.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, it's probably easier when you're hitting a 90 too, like if you're using that longer rod to be able to even make that cast.
Yeah, and set the hook in them too.
yeah, that's a big deal. And I think so. Now, when you get to the really light stuff, so those fish are high in the water column, sunning 1/16 ounce, 1/8 ounce baits. Do you get down to a medium light, or are you still throwing that on a medium?
Yeah, I do get down to a medium light in that aspect. That's when the like the Japanese mid-strolling rods with the metal tip and stuff come into play. Like I either like the 6'10" drop shot NRX or the new Poison Adrena. I've been playing around with it. The Shimano Poison Adrena. I think it's a 6'10" medium solid tip, and it's literally the blank came from Japan, and it's for mid strolling. It's got that solid tip, so you can, and it's not a medium action. It's like a light action. Like it bends to, you can bend it in half almost. But it took me a while to get confidence in that. But I think it really is crucial when you're throwing a 16th and 8th and like a hover rig.
Yeah.
I know a
the
couple
one theme
guys that
I'm
have
getting
the
from
extra
this.
guide.
The one theme I'm getting from this, Rob, is you're like a northern pike. You like your stuff expensive.
Oh yeah.
Love that. Any toothy critter likes it expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, for good reason, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about a rod of that caliber, and especially when you're getting that niche, that's where you're getting what you're paying for.
Sure.
You can get rods that can do the job, but when you're talking about one at the highest level, but then two, breaking down the nuances of throwing a quarter versus a 3/8 and how that can vary, and it comes down to the extra fish or two that could qualify you for the classic or not. That's a big deal. So when you're talking about G Loomis, you're naturally talking about some pretty freaking nice rods too, anyways. But
No doubt.
yeah. Well, fellas, is there anything else we might have missed?
Yeah,
Covered.
I think that's pretty much it. I guess the last question that I have is the way this is going. I mean, it sounds like we have seen these trends and all these different baits coming out over and over and all these new things and the braid and all this. But what do you think the next craze is? Is there anything that you see on the horizon that's going to change a lot here from a bait technique? Anything specific?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of the Japanese guys, like Kenta and some of them, and it sounds like, Japan is kind of ahead of us because they've been throwing the Jighead Minnow, like those style, like strolling for a while, and I think it's going to go where the fish don't suspend as much, and they're going to be living on the bottom more. So it'll be a lot of like Tyler Williams scoping with just crazy expensive like silicone baits, probably.
Oh, okay. That's
Interesting.
nuts.
Yep.
So
Interesting.
Some HD style stuff.
HD.
I don't know.
Taku was saying, I want to say it was on Mercer's pod. Some podcast, Taku was saying that he said he's done throwing the Jighead Minnow, like he's using a bunch of different stuff now, which is like,
Yeah, all dice and cubes, baby.
yeah.
Yep.
Do you think, last question, I just thought of this as we're talking about that. Do you think we're seeing another rapid increase in change in the fishing industry, where it's like, I feel like we went from this evolution of crankbaits and things and tungsten coming on the scene to now where technology forward facing jighead minnows, and now as all this JDM stuff is flying into the mainstream? Or do you think we're seeing a pretty rapid change of what's trending, if you will?
Oh, for sure. I think so. I mean, our lakes are getting a lot more tough to catch them traditional ways, so we're having to resort to like more finesse or more, like I said, HD high definition baits that are look more realistic than they ever have, and I feel like they've got a good market on that. So I feel like that's the reason kind of why it's trending that way, because a lot of these lakes have a lot of pressure, and it's just a different way to get bites. So, and we're all of us hardcore tournament guys are nerds, and we want to be able to catch them the best way possible at these lakes. So we're tackle junkies. We try and get all kinds of new stuff. So I feel like that's where it's going to.
Pretty soon we'll be all fly fishing with sinking braid and 2-pound test and a little fly.
I mean, yeah, I did catch him on a fly at Smith Lake.
That's awesome. Of course,
like under a bobber, like under a float.
No, just a jighead fly.
Wow,
that's cool.
Wow. Oh, you're saying like a tied jighead.
Yeah, it's called a juice jig.
Yeah. Yep.
Great Lure Lab podcast that Andy did with them. We'll have to link that down below. But
yep,
that's awesome. Well,
they're sweet.
Rob, dude,
they're sweet.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Dude, thanks for taking time out to come on here. It's been fun, obviously, watching you wax them this past year on the Jighead Minnow, and looking forward to hopefully seeing the exact same out of you in 2025, man. Are you looking forward to getting started here in a couple weeks?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think there will be much Jighead Minnow going on the first couple of tournaments. Hopefully, towards the end, you'll see it make a comeback.
Oh, and dude, I mean, less than 2 months, you'll be fishing your first classic.
I know, I'm excited for that. I got to go down there before off limits, and it was a very interesting place. I just hope I keep my motor intact while I'm running around down there.
Oh boy,
man. A little Wild West, eh?
Oh yeah,
Western.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, dude, again, thank you so much for taking time out. For folks that are tuning in, make sure you guys follow Rob on socials. We have all of that linked down below. Make sure you follow along with him. And obviously, as the elite season kicks off here the next couple of weeks. But Rob, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And there you have it with Mr. Rob G leading us off this whole Jighead Minnow panel. And like we told you guys, this was a couple weeks of putting this thing together. So we're trying to splice our different guests here where it makes sense and is seamless for you guys that are tuning in, watching, or listening. So we'll do these little cuts in between each guest, but of course we won't waste any time. So without further ado, guest number 2 of this Jighead panel, we are on to a guy that was won a Bassmaster Classic, a Bassmaster Elite Series title on this very bait, Mr. Jeff Gustafson. And we're on to our next guest here. No stranger to Serious Angler and no stranger to the topic at hand of today's show. I think he probably has done the most Jighead Minnow episodes or podcast videos, I think, of any angler of all time at this rate. But for good reason. I mean, winning $400,000 on it and being the trendsetter, I would say, of this whole rave. But Mr. Jeff Gustafson, buddy, it's good to get you back on the show. How have you been, man?
I'm good, boys. I'm happy to come on anytime, and I'm really happy that I'm down. I'm at Carl Jacobson's place in Tennessee. I'm on my way down to Florida to start getting ready for the new season, and my boat's in at Hennessy Outdoors here nearby, getting all my electronics and everything rigged up. It's like a real treat. I for years I kind of did that all myself, and just with the help of some friends, but it's pretty awesome. You take the boat and drop it off for a few days with those guys, and they just get everything dialed in, and it's top notch. So yeah, hanging out with Carl here. We've been doing a little bit of fishing. The water's cold as I've ever seen it down here. It's like in the high 30s. So we've not done very good fishing, but getting a few. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting down to Florida and some nice weather. I'm going to stop at Lanier for a couple days. That's kind of my favorite lake in the south, and get my spotted bass fix. And then, go to the land of the giants.
I've seen over the past couple of years on your social stopping in Lanier and everything, and obviously I've heard it. People rave about it for several years, of course, and I finally stopped in myself as well about a month ago, and I totally see why people like that place. It's a good time, especially for the minnow. It's a great time with the minnow.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I've caught some on it there, but I do way better there with like just the Ned rig and like a Nico rig. Yeah, do better there. But yeah, you can catch them on the minnow there, and I probably, um, probably more in the cold water like now than like I fish there more in March and April. Like historically, have more experience there then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a cool lake. I mean, you can kind of catch them however you want, really. Um,
Yeah.
but I always fish deep and fish offshore, and yeah, there's not many lakes that have the big spotted bass like that, so they're pretty special, and I really enjoy getting to fish there more than just about anywhere else.
Yeah. Andy, it seems like lately we could half call this podcast the Lanier podcast because we talked about it here with Gus. We've talked about it with Cody Meyer. He said if he would ever move east, he'd move to Lanier. There's been a handful of people that for some reason we bring up Lanier almost on every show in the past probably eight episodes.
We should deem it the gem
Yeah.
of the South at this point, right? Like everyone seems to love Lanier.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's like a lot of good fishermen come from that area too, and anglers. We've got two Paul Marks and Emil up from that are going to be on the Elite Series this year. That's kind of their home lake, and yeah, I've heard about those guys for the last few years just from some of my buddies there, and got to fish against them last year in the no scope tournament, the TAA event that they had. I fished in April, and they were both in it. So yeah, they seem like cool guys, and I was sort of pulling for them to make it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Are they running that back this year?
Nah, not that I've heard. At the end of it, like it was so fun, like for all of us that fished it and took part in it, and it sounded like there was going to be more of them coming this year, but I haven't heard anything yet. And at the time, he sort of said, "Yeah, I'm going to do one of these at the start of the season, and it will be a spotted bass tournament." Like in January, he was talking about doing one because we fished there like in April, and I don't know how many days I've got on that place, probably 60, 70 days over the years. And I don't know, like I might have caught one little like 12-inch largemouth one time, but I actually don't think I may have not caught a largemouth there before. And, Jason Johnson, one of my best friends there, and just other guys that I know fish it lots and have grown up around there, like, it's like 2 weeks out of the year usually that largemouths are a factor in the tournaments, and that's when they spawn. And we hit it for that tournament like right at prime time, and Chris Johnston just dominated and caught a lot of big largemouths. So I had like 18 pounds a day of spots, I think, and I mean it was a blast. Like fishing was good for me, and yeah, I ended up 7th, so I was in the money. I got the top 12, got to fish the third day. So it was a good tournament for me.
Yeah, it's exciting to see Lanier too, because it seems like lately, the past couple of years at least, the weights keep going up and up there. So they're just getting fatter and fatter.
Yeah. No, and they have these like 1-day local tournaments. Like, most of them I think take like 22 to 25 pounds to win, and like, yeah, lots of big fish. But I mean, if you go there for a few days and catch a bunch of fish, like you're going to catch some 5-pounders. They're not like it's probably I don't know, but yeah, you're going to get some shots at some 5-pounders for sure.
It's fun.
Worst case, you just run into some big old stripers who are take you for a ride.
Yeah, stretch a bit.
Yeah.
They'll bite.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will.
They'll bite just about anything.
Well, buddy, so. Yeah, they're fun. I learned at Lanier that I like to chase stripers around. Definitely will be going back for that. But to kind of get in the thick of things, man, this might be one of the sillier questions to ask you. But how often out of the 365 days a year do you have a jighead minnow rigged up on deck?
I mean, a lot. Like I always have one in the rod locker, kind of for sure. But like at home, maybe not in June, like because I'll fish at home quite a bit in June if we're back, and a lot of everything's kind of shallow, like walleyes and bass, and it's like a Ned rig and a small swim bait are kind of my deal there.
Yeah.
We but man, for the rest of the year and pretty much everywhere we go down south, I mean, yeah, it's always tied on. And I use that Smeltonator jig, and it's we've got it from like 1/0 up to 5/0 hook sizes, and then a variety of different weights. So it's, yeah, you kind of match the whatever minnow bait you want to put on a jig. You can kind of match it up to fish whatever depth you want and match whatever forage you want. And so some of that, the jig head changes a little bit, the size of it and size of the hook, but otherwise, yeah, there's always one tied on in my rod locker. I've got a picture from Lake Champlain that I was sorting through some photos the other day, just clearing up my computer, and I had a picture from Lake Champlain last year, and I think I had like a dozen different minnow baits tied on. Like that's kind of ridiculous, like overkill, but and it's not like there's a million pike there where you're like at home where I live, you could get all of those bit off by pike, during the course of a day. Like that wouldn't be strange. So, but I was a little overboard on that one.
You never know what they're going to eat.
Well, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Especially on a pressured fishery, I can see where that is. Especially not, I mean, it's not just you. There's a lot of guys that are definitely doing the same thing. But
yeah,
with that, this is one I think you'll differ from our other two guests in this show that I'm excited to ask you about. Is right now it can kind of be overwhelming for somebody that's trying to say get into this or say expand on their minnow game, if you will. There's so many different sizes out there, so many different jig heads, and obviously the Smeltonator's tried and true, great one. But yeah. I'm curious, with yours being especially when you go back home, it seemed to be more open to multi-species. I'm curious your range of size heads, like from quarter to half type of deal. Like, what's your smallest that you like to throw and the heaviest you'll go?
Like I definitely would use the 3/8 the most, and before we had forward sonar, I used the 3/8, but I would never use it for casting. I would always just use it for like hanging under the boat, moping. And now, because you're often casting at fish that are moving and trying to, if they're 20 feet down or 15 feet down, if you use a light jig, it's hard. It's hard to like lead them enough and hit them perfectly. So I use a 3/8 a lot more just because you can get it in front of fish when they're moving and whatnot. But obviously there's times when they're high in the water column or they're hard to catch. You got to use a lighter head just to like be more natural. If they're snapping and they're easy to catch, then the heavy jig's just gonna be better because you can get it. Some of the smallmouths, I mean, they could see that bait from 20 feet down, like 20 feet below it, and they're already like swimming up for it. And then you just pretty much got to just start reeling it, and you're going to be hooked up in 2 seconds. But I use the general rule, kind of like 12 or 15 feet and less, I'll use a quarter. Over 15, I'm using a 3/8, and then a 3/16 maybe for or 8th for like that under 10, like the ones, you definitely go to like Toledo Bend last year. There was a lot of fish that would be like 5 feet down. So you had to use a pretty light head. Otherwise it's too fast and sort of unnatural. But yeah, you just kind of got to pick the weight size to the depth of the fish, and sometimes how fast they're moving needs to be a consideration as well.
Yeah. There's the days that Andy would say over the summer. He was talking about it briefly offline here with you, but when some of those fish were super deep on Erie, and you throw like a 16th out, he's like, "Yeah, I cast it." I'd wait about 20 seconds, wait for it to get down. I'm like, dude, I'm not even fishing for those fish. I don't have the patience for stuff like that. But
yeah,
it's a real
hey,
thing,
if you're
man.
fishing a tournament and you need 5 bites and there's a big one out there and you just need it, I'll do whatever it takes, And there was days where, like, I think I was fishing a 3/32, and I'm literally watching it like spiral down, and then it would get 15 feet above them, and I'd close the bail and almost kind of like tight line it, and they would come up and eat it. But if it was too heavy, they wouldn't do it. So I was like, oh, this is so painful.
But like probably with smallmouths when they're anchored to a boulder or a little rock pile or something, they're on like they'll often sit on like the high spot of a little hump or then yeah, you could definitely do that. I'd have the patience for that for sure. But if they're chasing bait and moving, then you got to use a heavier head,
100%.
or it's just like near impossible to get it in their zone.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just living on a prayer, hoping that you can lead them by 50 yards.
So
and
it's impossible.
hope it's there. Just math.
Yeah.
You're trying to do trigonometry to figure all
You're
that
back,
out.
You're back to hoping at that point.
You're no longer scoping. You're just hoping.
Yeah.
I love that. So we know everyone who follows you knows that you're a scented jerk shads guy, right? With Z-Man and their baits.
Yeah.
So I'm curious when you have a dozen rods on the deck, right? Like what sizes do you have rigged up usually? Like what is like the go-to one or two sizes? Maybe man down.
Oh, he takes the tumble.
We're not talking about that.
That happened before?
He's like, yep, nope, bad question. Next one.
Yeah, I didn't like that question.
I guess to narrow it down, like what are your two favorite sizes of scented jerk shads that you normally would throw in a derby situation?
So like I probably use the 4-inch the most and the 5-inch second most. Just especially actually use the 5-inch a lot with the smallmouths just because especially up north they're eating a lot of bigger bait. But I really you wherever you're at you try to match the bait to the forage that you think they're eating. But I use that 4-inch a lot at those elite series and the classic that I won. Those were all on a 4-inch bait pretty well. And that's the ones I use the most, but we have a 3.5. And that one, especially now, like the fish are kind of getting tougher to catch just about everywhere, and you're seeing a lot more anglers are using those smaller baits. And then 7-inch, that one's mixed in too. Like at Champlain last year, there was I used the 7-inch a little bit. I probably should have been using it more. But then there was other guys that were using I think Fouts was using the 7-inch quite a bit.
Good
I
catch.
gotta fix my I gotta fix my my little setup here for my phone. But yeah, you just a big part of it is just really matching the bait to the forage though. Like that's what you're trying to do for the most part.
Got it. And then if you can real fast, like the 4, 5, and the 7-inch, what size? I'm just asking all the wrong questions here.
Hey, I'm gonna have this set up in a second, and then we'll be good. But
no, you're good.
You're good. Take your time.
Okay, well, I think we're good. I got a little more solid.
Welcome back.
Of a thing here
Your
now.
phone's not cracked, is it?
No, we're good. I got a kill.
That was a tumble.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome.
Always something.
All right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. But yeah, so as I was saying before, we were rudely interrupted by a phone drop. For each size bait, 4, 5, and 7-inch jerk shad, what size hook do you pair them with?
Yeah, so the 4-inch baits, I like a 2-aught. All the smeltners have that 604 Gamakatsu, so that's sort of a 2X, like a little bit of a stronger hook. It's still super sharp. You don't need a big rod for it, but that's my favorite hook. And just because you can catch a lot of fish on it, you're not going to, jack it. And then the 5-incher, I like a 3-aught hook. And then the 7-inch, I'll move up to a 4 or 5-aught sometimes even. If I'm smallmouth fishing, I probably like to keep it at a 4-aught just because it's that 5 starts to get to be a little bit of a big package. But if I'm largemouth fishing, using that 7-incher like at Lake Fork or Gunnersville or something, then I'm definitely using the 5-aught.
You dabbling with that 7-inch with some Lakers and stuff up north?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I never normally I do quite a bit of ice fishing for them, and I just never. I've been ice fishing a fair amount, but mostly catching walleyes. But out in the open water in the boat, back in September, I caught a bunch of lake trout and mostly just use the 7-incher now, because it's kind of like the thing with the big baits, the 7-incher, and I think you're across other brands too. You're seeing more guys throwing those bigger baits, and I think it's just part of the, how they react to a glide bait and a big swim bait. Like just those bigger baits motivate them a little bit more to move and bite sometimes. And that's all, that's all like trial and error and you figuring it out every day, like if that big one will work or not. But if they're biting it and they want that bigger bait, I mean, and you're around any number of fish, I think in my head at least, I feel like you kind of can select for a bigger fish with that bigger bait. Maybe you up your chances and get that little, an extra couple bites from bigger fish. But it's funny, like you'll see 2-pounders go eat those big baits, too. Like I couldn't believe when I started using those big flutter spoons back in the day, like at Kentucky Lake, and they're, like giant. And you like 2-pounders would like smoke those things all the time. Like
Listen, one of my
They're same sizes.
One of my favorite fish stories was with Bailey. We're fishing this little reservoir by us, and he's throwing the Arashi glide, and like an 8-inch smallmouth ate it.
Yeah. But
They're
that's
ambitious.
why we love them, right? Like that attitude is what we like. That's what we want.
Yeah, they just get up to it. It draws out the attention, and they're just like, I'm here. I might as well try to eat it.
Even though it's bigger than me, I will try to eat it.
Yeah, they're ambitious. That's for sure. So when paired with forward facing, one thing I'm curious about, or asking each of you guys, is, do you have like a preferred range or depth that you like? I'm not gonna throw at a fish that's deeper than 30, or I'm not gonna throw at a fish that's farther than 80. Do you have like a preference or like a restriction you hold yourself to, especially in a tournament?
No, not necessarily, but like obviously for the most part, like I'm not where I live, we don't catch them much deeper than 30 or 35 feet very often. So, but it's just relative to like whatever body of water you're fishing. But for the most part, the as far as you can, you're going to just throw. If you see fish deep, then I might want to see what they are in case they are bass. But generally, you're in that like 30 feet and less. And then as far as range, I pretty much like to set mine on 100. That's like a pretty good full cast. And, often, if you want them in that like 70, 80 range, I think that's sort of like where I want to hit them most often. But at least at 100, you get a little more time to like see them coming, especially if you're moving faster. If you have it set a little bit closer and you're moving fast, you're going to burn some fish just by like being on top of them too fast before you can get your bait to them sometimes. So, and then like full on like open water fishing, like what we were doing at Champlain last year, it's just like all pelagic fish, and you're not really fishing structure as much. A lot of guys are putting it at 120 now, and that just being able to see them out a little bit farther, and not necessarily to cast at them from that distance, but at that distance, but just to see them coming and get a little read on what direction they're going, and be, that can help you kind of set up and make a good cast.
Yeah, and shoot, with 12 different setups out there, I'm sure one of them you can have heavier to reach a sucker down in 40 or something.
Yeah. One or two will get a wind knot, and like, I just don't want to retie. I just grab another one and send it.
Efficiency.
But the other thing to add to that, I guess, is like, is like more and more people are doing this. You're like, we used to just get on top and catch all these fish vertically. And that's how I did it. Like we'd mark them on 2D, go get on top of them, hang that minnow on top of them. And now they're like a lot less tolerant of you getting on top of them with the boat. And I think in our minds, we feel like 30 feet is deep, but if you're in a boat 30 feet on top of a fish, I mean, they're aware enough to like know your boat's there. No question about it. And, so now we're casting at them a lot more. And that's, I think as we move forward, it's going to be more and more important, especially on like the really pressured fisheries, to like fire at them from farther away for sure, to get, just increase the more like if a bass knows that you're there, your odds of catching it go down big time. Like, is once it knows you're there, and that's if they're shallow, if they're deep, in any situation really. So if you can get your bait to them before they know that you're there, and then your odds of catching them go up a lot.
Especially in the fisheries you guys go to, being that these are popular fisheries, well known, always have boats at them typically. Yeah, it's we thankfully here in the north we have a little bit of fisheries that still they're pretty dumb and you can drop right on top of them still, but those days of dropping on top of them are almost long gone.
Yeah, no, same with where I live, but like, and our population up where I'm at's not that high, but like we have a lot of people fish up there, and we have quite a few tournaments. So the popular tournament lakes, I mean, they definitely smarten up a little bit more on the especially on the traditional areas that have always sort of been good. But yeah, if you get on some of those lakes that like, and you're fun fishing that don't get fished, I mean, yeah, then if there's like an 8-pack swimming by, you can sometimes catch like all 8 of them.
yeah.
Now, like any of the lakes where we have the tournaments, like if you see 8 of them going by, you're lucky to get one sometimes.
Yeah. I got this one lake that I absolutely love going to. It was the perfect description of this was this past summer where I hooked into one. They all chased it to the boat and it came off at the boat. And instead of opening my bail, I just put the bait back in the water, caught another one, put the bait back in the water, caught another one. Like I was fly fishing. Yeah, those days you can't do that at very many locations now. Yeah,
no,
that's for sure. But
so.
No, cool.
Gussy, what is your rod and reel setup when you have a dozen of them? Are you still running the same rod for each one, or do you have a couple different setups?
No, no, but like I'm using all spinning gear for sure. But no, I had a variety of, I'm using all. I'm pretty spoiled, lucky. I get to use G Loomis stuff. So, my absolute favorite rod for just like your the 3.5 to 5-inch baits is a 842 NRX Plus. That's just a 7-foot, medium heavy. There's a 7.2 GLX that I really like. It's sort of like that same kind of action. I think for people that are trying to get set up with if you want one real good stick for fishing a minnow, that 7 to 7.4 kind of medium action is what I like. You're seeing more of especially a lot of the young guys are using shorter rods, and I think they maybe have just a little bit more control on their twitching and ability to make the bait roll and do different things. But I like that little bit. I like that 7-foot length just for the bend and like the shock absorption, and just I don't lose a lot of fish. You're not tearing a lot of hooks out, but that rod that I'm using, that's my favorite, and I use it for Ned rigs and smaller tubes and small swim baits, underspins. It's just a really good all-purpose. If you're gonna get like one NRX, that's the one I would recommend for people if you're fishing for smallmouths and spotted bass and that sort of thing.
Now, have you experimented with the sinking braid at all?
I haven't. No, I've used original Power Pro since like the late 90s, and I've tried a lot of different kinds of braids, but like I try all kinds of different tackle. You don't want to miss out on any of the new like things that keep happening and coming along. But I haven't really played with the sinking braids at all. But like for years, I just used 10-pound. 10-pound braid, and 10-pound Power Pro's fairly thin. And in more recent years, like I used to just use 8 Power Pro for the marabou jigs, but now I use 8 most of the time for the minnow. I learned how to tie an FG knot probably like 5 years ago, and that was a game changer because I used to tie like a blood knot and like and a few other like leader knots, but like brutal knots. And I would never like break off on fish with them, but like I would break off like every other time you're snagged, and you couldn't like tie on bigger fluorocarbon to that light braid with a lot of the other knots. With an FG knot, I mean, you can literally tie any size fluorocarbon to any size braid. And now, like last year, I even started playing with the 5-pound braid, and putting an 8-pound leader on there, and I had no problems with it. So I think but the 8 is, really thin. And if I'm fishing deeper water, especially, that your bait gets down a lot faster. It's more natural. And I think that's sort of a trend you're seeing too with you can use, learn how to tie those good leader knots, and you can use that really light braid and still have a decent sized fluorocarbon leader.
Yeah. You talk about 5-pound braid, but there's only a few people I know that actually use it, and most of them are the Canadians just across the border from me. They're like, "What are you guys doing with that stuff?" So I picked up a spool of 5-pound Power Pro, and I used it on my drop shot rod now out on Erie for casting at them, and it hasn't failed me yet.
No, I did the same last year. I had it for years. I never used it because I was too scared. And the knots I was tying it would break, it would slip, it wouldn't work. And now that I learned how to tie that FG, it's, you can use that 5 for sure. I've caught a bunch of big fish out on Lake Ontario with it and never had any break-offs at all.
It's good.
Heck yeah. That 842 you were talking about, Rob mentioned the same exact rod that he loves, and we shared some clips recently on social about different guys' setups for the Jighead Minnow, and a lot of people keep talking about the 842. So it seems like you were in a lot of company with that rod being pretty spectacular for throwing it.
Yeah, well, that's a compliment because, Rob's. I don't think I beat him in any of the tournaments where a minnow was happening last year. Pretty impressive, like what he did, and obviously he's at the top of the food chain on that program. He's really good at it, and that rod is a beauty for sure.
Well, he may have had a great year on it, but you have a classic and 400 grand on it. So I think you're still good. You still have one up on him on that until he's got a classic. So it's you're still in good company. But
no, it's no, for sure. And like coming up on 2 years on that happening, and it was it's still a pretty magical moment for me and an event, and pretty crazy how it all went down. And like going back to like the minnow thing, that's been a pretty popular technique for like 20 years back at where I'm from, around Lake of the Woods and Rainy Lake. We have a lot of tournaments up there later in the summer and into September, and back in the day, the best guys were winning, and there were walleye guys that sort of transitioned into fishing bass tournaments, and they used to just dominate, and that was, they kind of shared a little bit with us, and they felt sorry for us probably, and just like, here, try one of these, and it was a jerk shad on a jig head, and it used to be Northland actually had sort of the first minnow head. It was called a mimic minnow back then, and then the original bait that we used was the Berkeley Power Minnow, the 4-inch Berkeley Power Minnow, and that was like in a smelt color, and it was kind of like a little bit of a bronze color. But man, that was like back in the day, that was sort of the juice. And then once we started using like the Elastec baits, I mean, just they're so durable. You could glue them on your jig head, and catch a bunch of fish, and then the buoyancy of it, I think is I've used them all, and I mean, I you still see every tournament top 10, like when that minnow bait's in play, like half the guys are using the Elastec baits, and they just I think the buoyancy of them just really helps them sort of be horizontal and swim naturally, and that was once I started using those. I mean, that's sort of just about all I use. I carry some other ones too that in the boat that you mix in here and there. There's obviously certain days where like one color or one bait is just sort of the deal, and you gotta mix those in too. But like literally, for me, thousands of fish I've caught on the Z-Man jerk shads.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, as long as you can avoid the toothy ones and your hook point doesn't roll over, you only need one bait for the whole day. Just make sure your leader's good. And usually the Smeltinator, I've never had a problem with the hook rolling over like some other jigheads. So usually they're pretty good as long as you can avoid the pike.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, 604 is nasty. Awesome. Like when I was pouring more jig heads, like all my Ned rigs had 604s in them, like all my ball heads. It was between that and the owner 5313. They're pretty similar hooks for me.
Yeah, that's a good jig too. Yeah, or a good hook too.
Yeah. Well, buddy, to cap this thing off, again, thank you so much for the time and joining us here. Appreciate it. It was a must-have to get you on this panel, and appreciate your perspective on all this. So the last thing we'll leave you with is, what do you think might be the next craze, if you will? What is the next jighead minnow that might make the fishing industry go wild?
Sadly, I think it's going to be the little dice style baits. For sure. I guarantee you that's what it's going to be, and you're going to see that this year probably out there. I think. It was one of those things that when you first see it and you're like, that looks kind of dumb, but then I started using it a little bit last year, and they're legit. So there's going to be an Elastec one of those coming soon, and it's going to be the best, I think.
Ooh.
Well, we're 2 for 2 now on guess saying the dice is what's coming next. So
yeah,
I think we have that pretty much confirmed and locked up.
Yeah. No, awesome. It's and just that style. Like there's the other little balls that have stuff happening on them. I haven't played with those yet.
There's a bunch of them now.
Everyone.
Yeah, by the time I'm smart enough to throw one, they'll be all sold out everywhere, and I won't be able to get them. Probably I should just bite the bullet, but yeah, they're kind of big bucks.
Yeah, that's gonna say it's the worst part for me. Is like you look and it's like $18 for one. I'm like, it's just a piece of plastic with some tentacles and flanges.
Yeah, and where we all live up north, like every smallmouth will bite it and it'll just be gone right away.
Or a pike.
Yeah, or a pike. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the pike really like the shiny new stuff. Right. Yeah, for sure. They'll take
Yeah, they're gonna look at the flatworm now and they're gonna be like, it's $4. Oh, look, a $20 dice bait. I'm gonna go take that instead. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yep. Well, buddy, thank you so much again for taking time out. Much appreciated. And dude, we'll be rooting for you down in Florida here in a couple weeks, man.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to getting it going. I'd love to get off to a good start for the season, and it definitely makes it a lot more fun and takes some pressure off. So my last year I finished almost dead last at the St. John's. It was sort of my only real bad event all year. So I'm due there, I hope, and looking forward to learning from some of my mistakes maybe. But yeah, want to get off to a good start, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. But are you guys going to be in Texas in March?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see you at the Classic, and hopefully under some kind of celebratory situation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Not on Saturday night at some party because I'm eliminated.
No. Hopefully over beer Sunday night for good reason. Yeah.
No. Okay. All right, boys. Take care. Keep up the good work.
And that is Mr. Jeff Gustafson here. It's guest 2 of 3 on our Jighead Minnow panel. I like to see how some of these guys have similarities in how they're throwing it, but also love to see the differences. And again, each of the 3 guests here have different perspectives, different POVs and approaches to throwing the Jighead Minnow that have obviously won them a lot of money, seen a lot of great success. And so with that, our last one, guest coming off of a top 10 already to start off the 2025 season on the BPT at Lake Conroe, and seen a lot of success with this bait on the Bass Pro Tour over the past several years. So let's get into our third and final guest for this show, Mr. Jacob Wheeler. All right, folks. And last but certainly not least, we are joined here hot off a top 10 at Lake Conroe, Mr. Jacob Wheeler. Jacob, man, thank you for taking time to join us.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah. So, we are on our 3 of 3 guests here, rounded it out, Jighead Minnow panel. And man, what's been cool about these the 3 of you guests, Jacob, is that all of you guys certainly have won a decent amount of money on the Jighead Minnow in the past couple of years, but we feel like from a approach and POV, you guys all differ. And so really to kind of kick this stuff off, it's kind of been a silly question to ask you guys, but is one that we think is important to start, is how often out of the 365 days a year do you think you'll have a Jighead Minnow rod set up on your deck of your boat?
So like I always have it on. Like,
Mhm.
so because obviously when you travel, I mean, you got listen, I have 100 rods rigged and ready to roll at all times, maybe like 90 some. So it's just like I always have everything tied on. But I would say I'm realistically throwing it, say, I don't know, maybe like 60% of the time.
Okay.
I said like there's a 60% of the time I'll have it on the front on the deck of my boat
On the
out
deck.
of like an event scenario. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I would say. Like if maybe practice, I'm not gonna like, I'll pull it out, but like yeah, so I would say 60% of the time I have it on the deck.
Awesome.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good amount of time, but not as much as we've heard from other folks. Has it?
Yeah.
Has it
No,
been,
I
Dave?
mean,
Interesting.
yeah, it just depends. I mean, I have it in my boat at all times, but having on the
Right.
deck's two different things.
Sure.
So
That's a good
you
point.
know, it's
That's a
like
good point. Yeah.
Right. It's
I
always
mean, I put a
in
lot
the
of
water.
rods in that Icon, but I on that deck, so I can still get around with it, but I'm like still the point. Like I think that I mean, it's a super dominant technique that obviously catches them in so many different ways, smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, but there's still certain times that it's not the deal. Like it's not the deal. The presentation's not the deal. They're just for whatever reason that's not what they want, and you have to sort of figure that out. And so it's obviously when it is the deal, it's the deal. There is nothing better. But figuring out a way to sort of mix in other techniques and other ways and finesse applications or bigger baits like a glide bait could be a better bait choice, in a lot of situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
And with that, kind of dialing that in particular, I mean, as far as sizes go, jig head wise, type of jig head, I mean, what are you most commonly reaching towards? What range of jig heads are you willing to kind of go from light to heavy with?
So, I mean, as far as range goes, I go from a 16th all the way to a 3/4 or a 1 ounce.
Oh,
But as far as probably the most used is probably 3/16ths.
okay. Okay.
That so what you have a lot of times is your jig head size determines how much action you're going to have in that given bait. So certain baits can take a bigger amount of weight than others. And so it's all different. It's such a unique scenario. So like say like a mooch minnow. I don't really go if I'm really wanting to get a little bit more of a rocking action out of that bait, I don't go over 3/16ths. But if I'm fishing for fish that are in 30 feet of water and they're moving fast, I have to throw a half or a 3/4 to get to them fast enough. I'm utilizing it's not doing the same thing it was doing with a 3/16. I'm using that tail action of that bait to allow that's the action I'm going to be using. It's a profile and it's that tail kick. So it's there's little nuances in that. But like with a freeloader, I can go up to like a 5/16 and still get that rocking action that I want. But so it's all just dependent on profile, jig head, hook. I spent a lot of time in my pool playing with that stuff, and it does make a difference. And that's not even a guarantee because I'm making like a decently long cast, and I'm not making an 80-foot long cast. So is it doing that at 100 feet? Is it not? So you're trying to figure these things out because what your bait does next to your boat when you shake it is not what it does out there at 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. So my quick side question on that was the home pool put in for the kiddos or more for you testing baits?
No, 100% for the baits.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, it was. It was designed. So it's like 60 feet long. It's 60 feet long, but it's pretty small. Like so, I made it. I should have made it. I couldn't get it to go any more. My wife wouldn't let me go any further, but I wanted it to be like 100 feet long. But it's like a it's sort of a cool setup. Like we have like a tanning ledge. So then
Uh-huh.
it drops off and it goes that way. I mean, I wanted to make it long as I could. I wanted to make it like 100 feet long, but I couldn't get that figured out. So, but it is cool. I mean, it's 8 feet deep and it gives, but I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I spend count. I mean, that's my PD room. That's where you go out there and you start playing with stuff and it does work or it doesn't, because the biggest thing that I can't stand from a standpoint of an angler or like a, an angler or company talking about is if I tell you something, it does something, then it better dang well do that,
Yeah.
So I always am like, functionality and what this bait does. If I say it does this with this, it does exactly that. And that's really something that I'm very adamant about.
That's cool. I wouldn't be surprised. You seem like the kind of guy from the detail oriented, like you were just talking about, to the lighting offline, getting ready to film this thing. I wouldn't be surprised if you had like a viewing room down below, where you and the boys were just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go cast. You tell me what's doing." Like,
Yeah, there's several times I'd have Hunter Shocks lives like not far, 15 minutes from me, and I'm like, "Yo, bring all your stuff over. We're going to deep dive into this new dang lineup today. We're gonna see what it is." And so he'll go down there at the end, and we'll be looking, and they'll be like, "Yeah, that one sucks." It's fun. It's the kind of stuff that you do with your buddies, and it's fun.
That's awesome, dude. So in line with the jig head sizes too, I love to and Rapple obviously has killed it with Mooch Minnow, the freeloader. I'm curious from guys are throwing the 2.5 inch all the way up to the 7 inch baits. I guess from your standpoint, same line of questioning is, but from a bait standpoint, like what are you cycling through, and how many baits will you have in your main cycle to try to figure them out?
So for me, it's really like I have a lot of stuff that no one has yet, so it makes it a little easier for me on all the stuff that I throw is Crush City stuff, but it's because I have stuff on the back burner that I'm able to have before everybody else has it. And but still the main deal, like the Mooch Minnow and all that, like its profile is a big deal, but I would still say 3.5 and 4.5 profile is your number one and number two profile all around the country. There's times when like a 6 inch plays or a 7 or bigger profile, but it just depends. It's very nichey. But day in and day out, for me, it's really like a freeloader, 4.25 inch freeloader is really like a 5 inch in a lot of other baits because of the depth. So it's a little bit different. Like your length is not that important. Your depth of the bait makes a big difference. So like a difference between like a big fat body crankbait and a shadow wrap, just because the shadow wrap's long and thin doesn't really but you start to have like more depth of the bait and have more body. It presents a bigger presentation. So like sometimes it's not talked about a lot. So like to me, like a 4.25 freeload is really like a 5 inch bait. And that's sort of like the 5 inch is sort of like the guarantee. That's a great size, sort of an in between 4.75. It's basically from 4.5 to 5.5. That's your standard everyday spotted bass, largemouth, smallmouth. We'll catch them guaranteed in the story. And the smaller baits, they tend to play when they're getting a lot of pressure or they're eating smaller forage, perch minnows, threadfin, all of these other things. So you're really matching the profile of what they're eating. And then the bigger baits, they're almost like a glide. It's like presence. You have more, they pull more. But they're completely different. Each one's completely different with jig heads and weights and figuring out stability and all that stuff and rod setup. So it goes into to me, 1 and 2, and then the bigger baits is like an addition to it. Like it's not going to always work. It's not always going to be the deal, but every day, day in and day out, I mean, like if I'm picking one size, it's going to be between that 4.25 to 5.5 inch size of profile. That's your best one day in and day out.
I love that. That's such a good point. Like when people talk about increasing your bait's like presence in the water, they always assume you're talking about length of the bait, making it longer. Where, depth. That's just make your bait just
profile.
Yeah,
it's all
completely
profile.
different. It's cool. Awesome.
I love it. Well, and I guess especially when utilizing forward facing, as far as your casting distance goes, I mean, we're seeing and hearing all these different things related to, okay, our fish getting pressured? What are we seeing when you're making a cast? Where do you like to generally be? I mean, as far as is there a limit for you casting distance wise? I mean, there's a limit, but I mean, where do you like to be range wise and then also depth wise with this?
So range wise, I mean, obviously the farthest away you can be from the fish with making an accurate cast is the best case scenario. But it's interesting because you have stained water, you can get away with a little bit more. but in clear water, I mean, there's times like smallmouth, once they get within 50 feet of the boat, sometimes you can't even get a bite. So there's scenarios in spotted bass are very similar to that in clean water because a lot of their habitat's similar to that. So it's just different. And each lake's different. Obviously, you go to some lake that they're not pressured, then it's whatever. But there's other scenarios that like everything has to go right. So to me, like the best case scenario I would say is staying 70 feet's a good 80 feet. Like I always have my range on like active target at like 100 to 120. So I'm able to see them and understand, okay, hey, there's a fish there. This is what's up. I'm going to react and sort of position my boat. And then I'm able to make my cast. So that allows me to be a little bit, like, it's definitely an important part of understanding, like, I'm not going to cast 120 feet unless I'm throwing maybe a top water or something like that I can really launch out there. But with a minnow, I mean, like the maximum amount of cast, I mean, maybe like a 110. I mean, I'm not going to say you might be able to throw it 120 feet, but you're probably not going to be as efficient, obviously. And then you're going to splash, you might spook them. So there's a lot of things that, like, so to me, like, at least the farthest I can get away, at least 75 plus, I would like to. If I can reach that fish and have the right presentation, that's it, you know, from 75 to 90 feet away and splash at, you know, at 98 and get that to them or something. I mean, my chance of catching that fish goes way up. But I mean, that's even the reason why I use active target, because I feel like I can see my bait further than I could on Garmin. That was the reason I switched, because I knew instantly that everybody was going to jump on this thing, and it was going to be a deal where you needed further distance, because as pressure gets and these fish get accustomed to it, the more pressure they get, the more important a further cast is going to be. And so that takes a little bit more time in lining up, because now your cones, instead of it being this, you know, narrow at 20 feet or, you know, maybe 3 feet, now it's at 20 feet. So you have to make, so it's really trying to get that perfect, or maybe it's like, might be, you know, your range is a lot wider. It's like a flashlight, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it all. There is a lot to it all on that. But I mean, the short answer, the further away you can get them, the better off with the presentation.
Yeah, makes sense. And so to cap off the setup, if you know, the Mooch Minnow's taken off, a bunch of people are picking it up, love throwing it. Let's take that for example, and like a 1/4 ounce head. What's going to be your rod, reel, and line setup for something like that?
So I'm really big on a little bit shorter. Like I really have 2 minnow rods. So I have a 610 medium light that but it's not like a medium light. Like it's got a super fast tip, really fast, and then it goes into backbone. But so and that rod is what I throw like a lot with a mooch minnow, with every bait that's under like a 1/4, right?
Okay.
1/4 and under, like I'm throwing that because I can whip it out there easier, I can cast it better. And when that fish bites it, a lot of times the problem a lot of people end up doing is a snap set on a minnow. So you'll work that bait, and then that tip, when it eats it, then you want it to load up and you pull. That really allows for, you know, to get that good hook set. Like I think a lot of times you even see that on a chatterbait, when you have a fish bite it, thunk, and you go to whack, you just pull that bait right out of their mouth, pop it right back out of their mouth. The best hook set is to pull set. And so it's like, doop, zzz, loaded up, and you just right in the top of their mouth, or right where, you know, they're not going to come off. So that's why I'm really big on that. I designed a rod with a 2.0 signature series rod that I made. And it's a 610. I mean, it's like my new series. But the 7.0 medium is more for a little bit larger baits, like a 5-inch or 4.5 inch. I'll even throw up to a 6-inch profile bait on that. Like, but still soft tip. In really, but it has a little bit more backbone. So it's like it doesn't go as far down. Like literally, I'm talking like, okay, so on the medium light, it might go down the tip, like that fast tip might reach 10 inches down the blank, where on the medium, it really reaches like 6 inches down the blank. So it's that subtle. It's that much of a difference though, when you translate that to like being able to cast that bait, being able to make that bait act correctly. That's all very, very important. So that's like big on the rod side. As far as like line goes, I'm not a big fan. Like I'm not a big fan of throwing super light line. I throw 10 to 12 pound line day in and day out. And Suffix is what I throw Suffix Advanced Fluorocarbon all the time. So Suffix is like a 12, their 10 is like a 12 for most other people's line. So I don't break them off. It works well. The bait works right. That's all, really important. And then main line is 8-pound braid, 8-pound Suffix Revolve braid. And that's like their finesse braid. And I was really big on this for the last like 10 years, probably like 5 years. That there was a braid called Nano Braid that Suffix made, and it was like really thin 8-pound nano braid. And this is before forward facing sonar and anything, before we could even see any of this stuff. When you have thinner diameter braid, your bait acts so much better. It just doesn't get your braid doesn't get as much drag in the water. Your baits and presentation, your lure falls faster. It gets to the fish faster. I mean, in current situations, when I was fishing like tidal water, like I was throwing 8-pound braid to a 15-pound leader, or, and it just because that bait would act so much better than throwing a 15 or a 20-pound braid like we used to throw all the time on spinning rods. I just never liked it. I was like, this is crazy. But it worked phenomenally. Like it does. Like, I mean, and if you're not, an 8-pound braid is pretty dang strong. It really is. So I think some people get really weird about that. Like, and it took a little while for me to be like, this is the deal. But that's all I've used for probably 8 years now. And I can't think of one time that I've caught 10-pounders on a spinner rod now. And it's just, on docks, we've caught 7-8-pounders on docks and around trees and never had one issue.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow. And not only all of those benefits, right? Your casting distance too.
That's
diameter braid.
That's the key. Your casting distance helps a lot. You're able to, your presentation, your casting distance is a big deal. Big deal.
Wow.
Are you an FG guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I actually was horrible at tying an FG. And I'm still not great. I'm just going to say, but what it really helped me when I went to Australia, you're tying FGs with like 60-pound mono leader, and you're able to see your line so much more, and you're able to see the knot so much more and how it cinches down. You realize so when you get to lighter line, you realize when the knot looks perfect and the actual what it really needs to look like. And so it just made me a lot more efficient. When I look at it, I'm like, yeah, it's trash. Or I'm like, that's perfect, it's done. Because I just caught like these giant barramundi on this knot and it didn't break. And I caught like 5 or 6 of them. And you're like, yeah, it's a pretty good knot.
That one works.
Yeah.
That worked pretty well.
So the recommendation, go to your local Home Depot and buy a rope. And that's how you can learn to tie FGs.
Yeah.
No, you just need to get like 60-pound. Yeah, 60-pound monofilament and start. If you fish in the salt, Adrian's really good at that because he fishes in the salt all the time. And he knows that because of Adrian, he was really like, oh man, this is not good because he's like always tying those thicker leaders on, fishing for tuna and everything else. So a lot of saltwater offshore guys are the best at tying FGs because that's all they do. Takes a little bit more pressure to tighten that knot though a little bit
compared to 8-pound to 12 or 10.
Yeah, 8 to 12 definitely changes the game a little bit compared to that. Yeah, for sure.
No doubt.
I love it. Well, this has been some absolute juice. Big takeaways, just thinking through for my season in 2025 and everyone else listening. Good stuff. You mentioned a little bit there related to you get an advanced baits, right? Like you're testing stuff out in advance. You're looking at all this new stuff that's coming out in relation. Do you have any predictions on the Jighead Minnow craze, right? We've seen this kind of push at this point. Anything what might be next in this category of forward facing, baits that we're putting in front of fish like that? Any bold predictions?
It's crazy to me. I can't get on the dice game. Like I just can't force myself to even go there. I won't do it. So I still mind-boggling to me that even to buy. I'm like, I'm spending $20 on 5 rubber dice with some fur, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I just can't do that personally for me. So I now it makes sense for like smallmouth if they think it's a bug and like spots. I can buy that, but like a southern largemouth, he ain't doing that. I'm just telling you right now. Day in and day out, it might catch a few here and there. Some of them have some viral reel of him reeling in a 10-pounder on a rubber dice, but day in and day out, the southern largemouth that's not going to play. As well, a little one. Let's put it that way. Maybe some way, somehow, but I'm just like, nah. I don't know. I really don't know because we're learning a little bit more. I think. I mean, there's some things in the back of my mind that I have a couple of things that I'm really excited that I'm working on. But so when you try to innovate and change something, those are the things that take the most time because you got to get it right. So like making another bait that's similar to like this or say a crawl, it doesn't take 2 years typically. Making a new genre of baits takes years. So that's when the PD side of things, you get on these ideas and you're like, let me do this, let me do that, let me do this, let me do that. It takes so much more time to innovate and change the game. And so like there's some things that I have in the back burner in my mind that I'm like, I want to do this really, really bad, but it might be a couple of years before it gets right. So there's some things that are in my mind for sure, but I can't share that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can't share that stuff.
I love it. Well, for the folks that are listening that were hoping for a Crush City, mooch dice, I'm sorry, it doesn't sound like that's gonna happen.
No dice.
It's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna say it's not gonna happen. I'm just saying I mean, there's some other baits out there that are simple, like that aren't dice that I'm like, okay, that's cool, like like some emo kamushi or something like that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, I can rock with that because it's more like a Ned / this. I can sort of run with that, right?
Yeah.
But the rubber dice thing, I just am like, draw on the line.
I do
No
not
mas.
trust it. Yeah.
Not for me.
Awesome. Well, dude, seriously, thank you so much for taking time out to hop on here and drop all the knowledge on the folks. And man, obviously, first time here on Serious Angler, and that is completely our team's fault for having it be such a long time to get you on here. But man, great job on a top 10 already. Started off 2025,
Yeah,
and hopefully get you back on here soon, man.
Absolutely, I really appreciate y'all having me on, man. You guys catch them up this season.
Thanks, man.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for today's show. Hopefully, people appreciated 3 different perspectives from 3 absolute hammers and guys that have made a good amount of money and had a lot of success off the old Jighead Minnow. But I guess some takeaways from this one is you getting different perspectives, different rod setups that might tailor to you guys, where you might have heard from Jacob or Gussy or G that you might differ from. So it kind of gives you some options. And so what we'll reiterate is everything they talked about, we will link down below so you can get all the different setups. We'll label it or categorize it, I should say, by each angler too, so you can see who is using what if you want links to those. So, guys, this is a fun episode. Obviously, this has been almost 2 weeks in the making, give or take, of trying to put this together. It's hard enough to schedule one person, let alone trying to get 3 guests to create a show like this, especially during derb season.
Yeah, what I'm excited to see too is like the people that actually watched it through. I want to hear it from down in the comments if you're tuned in on YouTube, if you enjoyed the panel episode, right? Like it's a lot of work to put these things together. So all credit to Bailey on that behalf of going through the schedule nightmare and getting us here all at the same time for most of it. But I think one of my favorite takeaways is the fact that Rob and Gussy both use the same rod, which I thought was pretty sweet. And one of them is like a full-time Shimano G Loomis guy, and the other one is kind of like a partial one, right? So that was kind of cool to see. And
he's a bougie Ewok.
Yeah, bougie Ewok. Yeah, and then the bait selection, like from microscopics all the way to as big as it gets. It's cool seeing where they apply each one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deacon, I'm curious what you're taking away from this.
Yeah, no, I think Andy makes a really good point. I mean, these panel shows, hopefully what they're doing for the viewer and is consolidating the info from super high level guests, right? I mean, in today's age, we're looking at time being such a pain in the butt to do anything and to listen to anything. And these types of things, there's so much out there. And hopefully what this does is it consolidates the three utmost experts or three of some of the best in the world at this, quite literally, in a quick format for everybody. They take some time to put together, but they're super worthwhile in my mind. And I learned so much. So anyways, of course, with that, in any situation, please give us the nod in the comments, give us a like, a subscribe, support us so that that we can continue to bring this stuff for free and have our sponsors, support our sponsors as well in all these situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And to add on that too, I'll say, this goes without saying for all of our guests, but obviously thanks to these guys too for taking out, time, because like you mentioned, our listeners and viewers here are getting all this stuff for free. We're not charging them for it. We also don't pay our guests. So seriously appreciate them for taking time out of their busy schedules to come out here. Honestly, people shouldn't really be thanking us much. They should be thanking the guests because they're the ones spilling the juice. We're the ones we're the messenger. Like, don't shoot the messenger. You probably shouldn't thank the messenger all too much here either, because they're the ones dropping the juice at you guys. I wouldn't listen to me. But, these two guys, you could definitely take some notes from with Andy and Deke. But we had quite a studded panel, one that was pretty awesome, and really couldn't thank them enough for taking time out, and we much appreciate it. And looking forward to hopefully seeing all three of. Well, we want to see Gussy and G, in the Classic itself, but hopefully Wheeler will be at the expo, see him. But it's going to be March is coming up fast, and we got more panel shows coming up, guys. We're going to try to kind of make that a thing that's you're going to see more often here on Serious Angler this year. There are definitely shows that you guys in the past have liked that we've done. So if you have ways or anything you want to hear discussed from a topic standpoint, like Deacon mentioned, put it down in the comments and let us know what you're thinking. But dudes, it was one hell of a show. I think we wrap this sucker up. Thank you everybody for tuning in. You guys got anything else left for the folks before we sign out here? All right.
No, I think we wrap it up and say we'll see you guys next week for everyone who tunes in, right? Yeah.
All right. Folks, appreciate y'all. See you guys on the next one.